Dear students, today we are going to see about the topic biomagnification, its causes and effects in environmental biotechnology subject. Okay, so when we are entering into the topic biomagnification, okay, so actually what is called as biomagnification? Biomagnification is known as a biological accumulation, okay, that mainly refers to the process by which a certain toxic substances, okay, such as mercury and pesticides, find their way into the environment like water bodies and they gradually move up to the food chain in much higher concentration. Okay, so my biomagnification is known as a biological accumulation that refers to the process by which the certain toxic substances such as mercury and pesticides find their way into the environment like water bodies and gradually move up the food chain in much higher concentrations. So it mainly refers to the accumulations of the elements. It mainly refers to the accumulations of the elements and compounds of harmful substances in the tissues of living organisms. Okay, so when they move through the food chain, it get accumulated. Okay, so it refers to the accumulations of elements and other compounds of harmful substances. Mainly, they are deposited in the tissues of the living organisms. Okay. So mainly they have the tendency of the organisms to accumulate, okay, to certain chemicals to a concentration larger than occurring in their inorganic and non-living environment. Okay, so those chemicals or the elements or the compounds, they have the tendency to accumulate. Okay, so even our organisms have the tendency to accumulate those chemicals, okay, to a higher concentration or the concentration larger than occurring in the inorganic and non-living environment, okay, like soil or water, or in case of animals, the larger than their food. Okay, so this process is also called as bioamplification. This process also known as bioamplification. Okay, so it is the increase in concentration of the pollutant that occurs in the food chain as a consequence of. Okay, so it is the increase in the concentration of a pollutant. Okay, so mainly when it moves through the food chain, it increases in the concentrations of a pollutant that occurs in the food chain as a consequence of persistence, okay, and bioenergetics and a low rate of internal degradations. Okay. It is also known as bioamplification. Okay, so it is increase in the concentration of a pollutant that occurs in the food chain as a consequence of persistence. Persistent means cannot be broken down by the environmental process. Okay, that is called as persistence. And bioenergetics, it moves through the food chain and low rate of internal degradation or through the excretion of the substance, often due to water insolubility. Maximum these compounds do not get soluble in the water. Okay, so they have a low rate of internal degradation and excretion of the substance is often mainly due to water insolubility. Okay, it is also known as bioamplification. It leads to increase in concentration of a pollutant that mainly occurs in the food chain as a consequence of persistence, bioenergetics, and low rate of internal degradations or excretion of the substance, often due to water insolubility. Okay. The toxic substances that find their way into the tissues of organisms arises from intoxicated or contaminated environment. Okay, so the toxic substances that find their way into the tissues or the organisms mainly arises from the intoxicated or the contaminated environment or food. Okay, and that is mainly consumed by the organisms in a lower trophic level. Okay, so first will be starting from a lower trophic levels such as fish or the zooplankton. Okay, so these lower organisms are consumed, okay, were consumed, pass the toxic substance to the next trophic level. So these lower organisms, when they are consumed by the higher trophic level organisms, so these toxic substances get moved into the next trophic level organisms. Okay, so thereby there will be an increase in their toxicity. that is attributed to their persistence and also food chain energetics. Okay, so that increase in their toxicity is mainly attributed to the persistence and food chain energetics. So that leads to the substance concentrations increasing progressively of the trophic levels. That leads to the substances concentration is increasing progressively as the trophic level also gets increased. Okay, so in this picture you can able to see, okay, so how when it is mixed with water, when the compound is get mixed with water, it was first taken up by the zooplankton. It is found to be 0.04 ppm. So after that, that zooplanktons are taken up by the small fish. Okay, so this concentration has started increasing to 0.5 ppm, and larger fish. Okay, so that is about 2 ppm. And when that fish, large fish, was taken up by the prey like a eagle. Okay, so its concentration has increased to 25 ppm. Okay, so it is a kind of cumulative increase in the concentration of the persistence and substances like pesticides, heavy metals, etc., as they move higher in the food chain. Okay. Okay, so this is another example. Okay, so lakes become toxic because of chemical waste dumping. So this chemical waste was first taken up by the fish. Okay, so fish becomes toxic because they ingest toxic plankton from the lakes. So that fish was taken up by the beer, where the concentration has got increase. So the toxin moves through the food chain and transfers causes the top consumers to become intoxicated and die. Okay. Okay, so this is a process of magnification, same thing. Okay, so what are the substance? Okay, so that will go for a biomagnification process. Okay, some harmful substances that can able to magnify when they move to the higher levels of the trophic level. Okay, so first one is it is mainly this DDT. Okay, so that is dichloro diphenyl trichloroethane. Okay, so DDT is dichloro diphenyl trichloroethane, and HCB is hexachlorobenzene. Okay, HCB is hexachlorobenzene. Okay, and PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. Okay, and toxophene. Okay, and non-methyl mercury. Okay, so DTT is dichloro diphenyl trichloroethane, and HCB is hexachlorobenzene, and PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls, and toxophene, okay, and monomethyl mercury. Okay, so these are some substances that can able to magnify when they move to the higher levels. Okay, so bioaccumulation. Okay, so like when the time increases, okay, when there is a prolonged exposure of those substances from the lower trophic level, it gets accumulated, and it when moves to the higher trophic level, it gets increased in its concentration. Okay, so that is bioaccumulation. So bioaccumulation of biomagnification. Okay. Okay, so what now we will see about what are the various causes of biomagnification. Okay, so for first one is the agricultural products. Okay, so these are causes of biomagnifications. So agricultural products. Okay, so the chemicals used in agricultural sector. Okay, so mainly they contain highly toxic substances that result in biomagnification. For example, we will be using herbicides or pesticides or fungicides and inorganic fertilizers also. These chemicals are able to penetrate into the soil and where they get accumulate to a toxic level, and also find their way into the rivers and lakes. That's through the surface runoff during the storms. Okay, so the chemicals include the herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and inorganic fertilizers. Okay, so these chemicals can able to penetrate into the soil where they accumulate to a toxic level, and also find their way into the rivers and lakes through the surface runoff during the storms. Okay, so this industrial effluents and the waste from agricultural industries, the chemicals used in the farms or released in the industries that contain traces of heavy metals, namely lead or copper or arsenic, mercury, and cadmium. Okay, so these toxic metal chemicals and heavy metals are mainly absorbed by the zooplankton first. Okay, so they once ingested, they are consumed by other organisms. Okay, Once ingested by other consumers, the toxic chemicals and heavy metals, okay, are released into the primary consumer body's tissues. Okay, so in these tissues, what they will do, they will start accumulating, okay, to the toxic level that may cause any adverse health effects. Okay, so that causes mainly the adverse health effects and transferred to the next trophic level upon consumption. Okay, so they and started gradually moving through the food chain in the much higher concentration. Okay, so first causes mainly agricultural products. Okay, so the toxic chemicals and the heavy metals are mainly absorbed by the zooplankton. Okay, and they are ingested by the other higher trophic level organisms, where they start accumulating and leads to adverse health effects. Okay, so when they are transferred to the next trophic level upon the consumption, gradually move up the food chain in the much higher concentrations. And next one is the organic contaminants. Okay, the organic substances such as biosolids and minerals have essential nutrients that are used by the plants, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon. Okay, so the organic substances such as biosolids and minerals have essential nutrients. Okay, so that are mainly used by the plants like nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon. So this excessive use of all those chemicals are found to be harmful and may causes eutrophication, and they mainly causes the eutrophication, so which leads to excessive growth of the water plants such as algal blooms that deprive the aquatic animals oxygen, leading to the death. Okay, so that leads to the excessive growth of water plants such as algal blooms that deprive the aquatic animals oxygens, leading to their death. Okay, so most of the organic manure is processed in industries mainly, and use of chemicals to increase their nutritive value. Okay, so the biosolids, okay, that are mainly used in the agricultural forms are treated using the toxic chemicals that may contain mainly the heavy metals. Okay, so when these organic substances are released into the farms, they releases the harmful substances that are absorbed by the primary consumers and later accumulate in the other organisms. Okay, so these are about the organic contaminants where they lead to eutrophication. Okay. And next one is the plastic pollution. Okay, so we know the disposal of all the plastic waste near the water bodies may not only directly harmful the aquatic organisms, but also the animals that also the other animals of the trophic levels in general, or higher trophic levels. Okay, so some research has shown that plastic mainly contains a bisphenol A compound. Okay, so that is one of the major contaminants released into the water bodies. Okay, so what will happen once the body of the fish as well as a minute disintegrated plastic are taken up by the other consumers that ingest the fish. So adukapra, like from that it will move to the higher other trophic levels, and next to the higher trophic level it start getting accumulated. Okay, so third one is plastic pollution. Okay, and fourth one is mining. Okay, so even mining substances, we have zinc, copper, cobalt, lead, and other chemicals. Okay, so these mineral deposits may be released into the aquatic and adjacent farm environment. Okay, where their toxicity levels rise tremendously upon the absorption by aquatic and farm animals or crops. Okay, so when mining substances such as zinc, copper, cobalt, lead, and other chemicals, so these mineral deposits may be released into the aquatic and adjacent farm environment, where their toxicity levels rise tremendously upon the absorption of aquatic and farm animals or the crops. So they are then consumed by the organisms that are in the lower trophic levels. Okay, so these organisms are then consumed by other organisms in higher trophic levels, leading to the accumulations of these metals in the different trophic levels. Okay, so these are some of the causes for bioaccumulations, like agricultural products, organic contaminants, plastic pollutions, and also mining. Okay, so now we will see about the effects of biomagnification. Now we will see about the effects of biomagnification. Okay, so when we see about the effects, it affects mainly the human health and also other organisms' health. Okay, so when we see about the human health, effects on human health, so the consumption of the seafood, okay, has been linked to certain types of cancer also. Okay, so this is as a result of accumulations of mercury and also polyaromatic hydrocarbons in the tissues of marine organisms. So we know all that mercury is a known to have an adverse effect on humans, such as deteriorations in the nervous system, impaired vision, hearing, and speech, that leads to the involuntary muscle movements and also corrosions of skin and mucosa. Okay, so human health, அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, like we like consumptions of seafood that link to certain types of cancer. Okay, like for example, mercury and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in the tissues of marine organisms. So mercury is known to have an adverse effect on the human, such as deteriorations in the nervous system, impaired vision, hearing, speech, leads to involuntary muscle movements, and also corrosions to the skin and mucosa. So when we see about the effects in aquatic animals, okay, so ingestion of or a digestion of subsequent accumulations of heavy metals in the tissues affect the microorganisms in their development and also reproduction stage. Okay, so consumptions of heavy toxic metals in the seabirds has an effect on egg production. So the seabirds produces eggs with soft and thin shells which easily crushes as they try to incubate them. Okay, so consumptions of the heavy toxic metals in the seabirds has an effect on egg production. So the seabirds produces eggs with a soft and thin shells which easily crashes as they try to incubate. So and that other cases that results from contaminations of water bodies with the toxic chemicals such as selenium and mercury include the damage to reproduction systems of the fish. Okay, so polychlorinated biphenyls are highly concentrated in the water bodies and have the same effect on the aquatic animals. Okay, so the result from the contaminations of water bodies with the toxic chemicals such as selenium and mercury that include the damage to the reproduction system of the fish. So polychlorinated biphenyls are highly concentrated in water bodies and have the same effect on the aquatic animals also. So when we see about the food chain, okay, so accumulation of the substances that causes biomagnifications can disrupt the natural food chain also. Okay, so where these toxic chemicals found their way into the soil and also water bodies as a result of runoff, and they are then assimilated into the primary consumers tissues after consumption. So these primary consumers such as plants, okay, are then consumed by secondary consumers and are which in turn are consumed by other organisms. Okay, so the chain continues up to the highest trophic level, leads to biomagnification. Okay. So what may be the effective solutions to biomagnification? Okay, process. Okay, so eliminations of use of some heavy metals. Okay, so they can't be completely prohibited or completely eliminated, but we can able to ban them and we can go for an alternative source. Okay, so by substituting any alternative source instead of those heavy metals, and at least we can able to um, uh, reform them, like we can able to make the toxic compound as a non-toxic one and we can able to use that as an alternative source. Uh, that helps in the reduction of this toxic substances and cleaning of contaminated locally. Okay, so the areas that have been exposed to toxic levels should be cleaned completely and exponentially. Okay, so the government should identify the areas that are contaminated with the solid waste and also medicinal waste incinerators and closed down areas. Okay, so the government should also ensure that offices, schools, among the other buildings that are occupied with the humans are not located near these areas. Okay, and role of institutions in handling all these toxic substances. Okay, for example, if we take health sectors, I can say, okay, especially the dental departments should eliminate the use of mercury containing items. Okay, and use more secure alternatives. Okay, so dental departments and mercury containing items and use more secure alternatives. So the government should also evacuate and securely store the indoor regulators and thermometers that contain the mercuries. Okay, so they also have to have a part to play in unison with the with the schools to avoid providing the leaded water to the children in the school. Okay, and insisted strategies on better alternative of clean and treated water. Okay, and be cautious with the treated wood. Okay, so for example, ammonical copper zinc arsenic, okay, used mainly in the treatment of wood and fungal decay. Okay, so this is a chemical preservative that is mainly act protects the wood from rotting due to insect and microbial agents. Okay, so the paint minimizes the filtering and contact. It's important to repaint if the wood paint deteriorates also. Okay, avoiding the usage of PVCs. Okay, so when buying plumbing materials, it is important to avoid mainly this polyvinyl chlorine PVCs. Okay, so it contains lead that may contaminate the drinking water and the environment. Okay, so if they are already installed, and an alternative would be avoid drinking or using the hot water so that rushes out the tap after initially opening it because it contains lead traces also. Okay, so the best water is icy cold one that pours after several minutes. Okay, so these are some of the effective solutions that we can able to take some measures to avoid, or we can go for using an alternative source for this source of all this heavy metals or any toxic metals or any toxic substances. Okay, so eliminations of the use of some heavy metals and cleaning of the contaminated locally, and role of the institutions using the toxic substances. Be cautious about using the treated wood. Avoid the usage of PVCs. Okay. Thank you. So today we have seen about the what is introduction about the biomagnification, and what is bioaccumulation, and what is a bioamplification process, what are the causes and effects of those biomagnification, and how what are the effective solutions that can be taken up by ourselves to reduce this biomagnification process. Thank you.